came out, was released today. We have some experts and some stakeholder respondents who are going to respond to what this 1.5 report means in the business world, in the NGO world, for us in South Africa. There's 5 chapters in the report written by about 90 authors.
I think it's fair to say that as the evidence gathered and we delved into issues of feasibility and perhaps some of the politics changed as well, and the importance of the urgency of 1.5 and the implications of going beyond 1.5 became clear, that it became a very important and certainly contested report.
So a lot of this chapter 2 is around trying to tease out what the differential impacts are between 1.5 and 2 degrees warming. So the old target to avoid dangerous climate change and the new target. But there's some critical parts of the Earth system that might actually shift state in this critical period between 1.5 and 2 degrees. And one of those relates to Arctic sea ice. So the risk of totally ice-free Arctic ocean in the summer. So some of the evidence suggests somewhere between 1.5 and 2 degrees. For various feedback reasons, the Greenland ice sheet starts to essentially just continue to disappear. And even if you reduce temperatures again, that runaway melting happens, and that commits us to about 6 to 7 meters of sea level rise.
We spoke about how difficult it is for us as individuals to relate to what the world will look like under 1.5 and 2 degrees. So we can talk about all these macro scale impacts, but what will our daily lives look like?
The good news is that it's still possible to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. That's the main message. And there are well-documented benefits to limiting warming to 1.5 as opposed to 2. That includes avoided premature deaths due to heat stress, air pollution, malnutrition.
We have the consumers who need to make different choices. We've got the macro or the large-scale companies that need to put the money somewhere. But what do we do with the labor, right? With the people who are involved in these extractive or these industries that are implicated in climate change, to a large degree completely against their own will.
The impact of climate change is going to be unevenly distributed. That's a very important finding. And unevenly distributed in terms of those who are poor and most vulnerable will of course bear the burden of climate impacts the most. So that talks to what we've been working on in the National Planning Commission and many others, I'm sure in the space, on what is called the just transition. How does this report impact on that work? Well, it's just pushed us into an unbelievable need for urgency.
Runaway climate change is really got massive implications for long-term systemic disruption to the global economy. So actually considering it is critical. So I really watch what the reinsurers are doing because they're picking up the tab of long-term climate change. So what you're seeing globally in the reinsurance space is this shift towards more sustainable, more low carbon type investments and benchmarks. And I think that knock-on effect in the investment community will be felt.
In terms of emission reductions, the report says again that on current emissions trajectories and continuing at that level of ambition, there's a significant risk of exceeding 1.5 degrees. If things continue as we go in, even with mitigation policy as it is at the moment, we're going to be closer to 3 degrees.
So in South Africa, we have a particular challenge with one of the key systems driving our emissions profile, and that is energy, and coal particularly. So we need to reach 0% coal by 2050, and that is going to be particularly challenging. Why? Because we are hugely dependent on coal. And right now, when we're dealing with a shift towards new renewable energy, there has been massive contestation by vested interests in this country.
If you want a 50-50 chance of staying below 2 degrees, not a certainty, then we can only emit another 570 gigatons compared to the 2,200 that we have already emitted.
Education helps change people's behavior, but unfortunately education takes a long time and our window of action is very short. So we need to have education, but we do need something else. That something else would ideally be sort of government laws that just force people to do things.
You probably can't do any of this if you leave 2/3 of the world's population, i.e. the poor people, behind, because for very obvious reasons, if you don't know how you're going to feed your family tonight, the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere in 2040 just does not concern you. You've got to be opportunistic. Well, maybe if you harness some of those development outcomes, you actually provide yourself with the pace and the scale and the breadth of change required to get you to 1.5. So sustainable development then becomes sort of a trampoline into the type of unprecedented change that is required.
The biggest takeaway message for me from the 1.5 report is how government and policymakers have to be really cognizant of how mitigation measures are designed and adaptation measures are designed and implemented to make sure that they don't do more harm than good.
They identify future hotspots where the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees is actually quite significant, and Southern Africa is one of those. The fact that Southern Africa in general is a semi-arid region, and so from particularly a water point of view, the whole region is really quite water stressed. And so quite small changes in temperature and rainfall can lead to quite big shifts in water stress.
These are really changes on an unprecedented scale, basically, and that's kind of moderate language. We need a Marshall Plan, right? We need it. It's just super urgent. We should have been doing this 2 decades ago, and we haven't.
Because as this IPCC report tells us, we only have 12 years to make the difference, essentially, to set the trajectory right. So that is going to be the time against which we'll be operating.
Actually investigate, I want to be investigated.
What if we decided that the carbon budget must be spent on all those sustainable development objectives, which this report tells us will put us very much on track to still be able to stay below 1.5.
Really a consumer revolution, so getting people to start actively making real decisions around where they put their money, I think is what might help shift the dial.
What we say is that you have to start now. You have to get to net carbon neutrality sometime between 2040 and 2050. That requires a doubling of the investment in renewable energy in the next 2 decades.
We all need to be active and actively engaged in all these decisions that's being made that will put us at risk if we don't actually take the recommendations out of this 1.5 report.